coming back. And like I said, it's so fantastic to see so many people interested in this particular movement and practice. So I just want to pick up where we left off, summarize for those people that weren't here last week. So we spoke about what continuous provision is for us. We spoke about independence. We spoke about ownership. We briefly started to talk about the difference between continuous provision and enhancement. If you remember back to last week, I used the supermarket analysis of how the shop is laid out as your continuous provision, and almost the fantastic deals that come up throughout the whole year at different times are your enhancement. They're how your children are going to access the national curriculum. And so this week we're going to talk about that. And when I was reflecting on the speech from last week, I thought about what was my key message with that. And what I will really want to tell you more is that the base of this is about the continuous provision. It is about the environment. And I can't stress that enough. Followed very closely by the enhancement, and then topped off with an effective adult support. And we're going to cover all three of those things in today's session. Now, hopefully today's session will give you a better idea of what recording looks like. Now, from my Twitter feed, we got some really positive feedback. You wanted to know more about what does recording look like, and particularly how do you reach year group objectives. So we're going to make a start. So I want to recap and put you all in the same page. So this is our timetable. This is what our timetable looks like. It's not negotiable. It very much is dominated by continuous provision. You can see every morning session is continuous provision time. I want to reinforce what I said last week. This isn't just a golden time-esque activity. In my opinion, you can't do this in the afternoon and just have continuous provision in the afternoon whilst you dedicate time in the morning to teaching your more traditional format of English and maths. For me, that simply doesn't work. We have put a great emphasis at St. Paul's on making sure that continuous provision is the way we learn, and we learn through play. In the same light that we got rid of golden time because of that, because we realized that every opportunity to play is an opportunity to learn. So as you can see at the start of the week, we have various teacher inputs. I will do 4 of those because we have 4 learning challenges. And in the rest of that continuous provision time, I said last week, I'm very fortunate to have a teaching assistant, and there is always another adult that is available in the space. The reason for that is that we want to ensure the quality of play and the quality of learning throughout the whole process, and we want to monitor that. In the same way that you might monitor if you're an SLT member, you might monitor the provision across the school. We want to monitor the provision of play in our classroom and support and challenge where needed. So those teacher-led inputs last for 20 minutes. I'm going to try and give you as much time and as much information as possible throughout this session because I know you want practical advice. So those sessions will last for 20 minutes and 20 minutes only. I come from a background of musical theatre. You might tell from the jazz hands that I always use when I'm talking. Throughout the podcast, I'm always using my hands. But I love putting on a show. It's the thing that I love doing most. As a teacher, it's really hard to kind of get out of the mindset initially of it's less about me now and more about the children's learning. We have a tendency such to stand in front of classes and think this is teaching. I'm talking to you, you're going to observe. And actually, as professionals now, and taking this approach of continuous provision, we need to have the understanding, the collective understanding, that the real learning is going to happen when children get the opportunity to learn through play. And if you have that philosophy running through your classroom, that's when effective continuous provision is going to happen. Now, those 20-minute sessions do not include maths. Okay, and this is something that I get asked a lot. Do I do whole class maths inputs? The answer to that is no, I don't do whole class maths inputs. What I do is I run focus groups throughout the week where we tailor the maths, and we follow the white rose scheme, but we tailor the maths to the children's needs and any areas that we're going to address. I teach them strategies. I teach them how to use manipulatives. As I spoke about last week, one of the key areas we have in our classroom is the maths provision, which is manipulatives in a set area. Now, also what I've tried to include in this presentation is pictures of that provision. So you're going to see pictures this week, and I'll point out when we get to the maths provision. So yes, the 20-minute sessions cover, I will do a writing input, I will do a example of generating thoughts for the writing input, which forms part of my learning challenge that I'm going to come on to talk about. But then I'll model 2 foundation subjects, which is so important. The modeling is the most important thing at the start of the week. Once you've set the models up and you've given that high quality model, then you can start to expect children to replicate that and be doing that in the continuous provision. Trying to think anything else that you need to know about the timetable. Ben, is there any questions that have come in straight away from that? Can you hear me?
Sorry, yeah, no, I can. I just didn't unmute myself. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
So how often do you run focus groups, and are they for maths, writing, and reading? And then how do you manage to get through all of the maths objectives doing focus groups only?
Okay.
So this person has said that they follow maths no problem and require daily lessons.
Okay, so this comes through, if you watched our podcast, this comes through the expectation and buying from staff, from leadership teams. I am confident, and I can't tell you this and expect your SOT just to pick this up, but I am confident in my thinking that we will get through all of the statements for maths. That does not mean that I am going to teach directly every single objective. If you have effective provision in your environment, that is how you're going to cover some of those objectives. You can use your adult support to support that further. So just because I might not have, throughout the whole duration of the term, I might not do a focus group on shape, for example, in terms of 2D shape and 3D shapes. But when I'm in the environment, they're there and I'm modeling them with the children. In terms of the how many a week for maths, I tend to get through 3 focus groups with year 2 and 2 focus groups with year 1. Those focus groups, the input for those focus groups, again, no longer than 20 minutes. The reason I keep on going on about this 20 minutes is because we know about children's attention. They will not listen to you for longer than 20 minutes. You can probably picture some of those children in your class right now who cannot do that, physically cannot do that. And they're the children that when they're sat on your carpet are the ones trying to sit on their hands to stay still, or they're fiddling with something to keep their mind occupied, because let's be honest, they don't want to listen to you anymore. They want to get on with learning. So we try to do that as much as possible. English writing groups the same. However, if I feel I want to challenge or support further, what I will do is I will set off something we've referred to as a shadow group. And what shadow group is that I will just give a brief 5-minute introduction to an activity. I will support where I need. I will challenge in terms of, I will introduce the activity. I'll say why, I'll talk them through different strategies for why we're doing this, and then I'll set them off by themselves. This really comes down to what your SLT are going to be expecting to see in books. Ben, you might be able to give a bit more about this, but in the sense that my maths books, that we don't accept pools that generally have a culture. It's a calendar-based culture, and what I mean by that is you have no expectation that if you were to look for our maths book, every date has an activity related to it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So we don't expect writing or recording every single day. We don't expect photographs stuck in just to show and prove that you as an adult have done it. We'll talk to the children. I'll ask the children. They'll be able to tell me what they've done through their learning. So there's no requirement for daily recording at all.
Wonderful.
So James, a couple of questions coming through. So does continuous provision include the outside environment when you're talking about this? Is this staffed separately to the adult supporting continuous provision in the classroom? Okay,
so we have an immense amount of trust in our children, and the outside learning is equally, there's not always adults outside. There is not always adults outside. Our classroom is cut off. We have a safe environment. We've checked it all for safety, but there isn't necessarily a member of staff out there at all times. I can see through the windows. I have a beautiful classroom. I'll show you some pictures in a minute, but no, we don't have adults out there all the time. That's not to say adults spend time out there, because they do, and they model what the expectation of the environment is. However, we are keen to ensure that actually there's children are aware that this is outside provision is different to inside provision, and that opportunities come from outside learning that don't necessarily come from inside learning. And if I'm going to point you in the direction of someone that, and I've mentioned him all of last session, Alistair Bryce-Clegg has 2 fantastic books on outside provision and inside provision, and clearly defines the difference between the two. And for me, the main takeaways from that are that inside provision it's about ensuring that actually the learning challenges are, how can I put this, are provided and sheltered and accommodated by the provision that's inside, and that's completely different to the outside.
Thank you. So James, in a 1-word answer, do you have to record the maths in a formal book?
No, not always. I can't say that word, not always. Maths comes in so many different ways. It would be naive of us to think that maths should only be recorded in a book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are all children in the class included in one of the maths focus groups throughout the week?
Yes, I get to every single child, and I've got 30 spot on in my class. I get to every single one of them at least twice for maths and twice for English. And then on top of that, they even find that if you stick rigorously to the 20 minutes, you have time, and lots of it, to do provision for outside learning as well. Outside learning, additional learning challenges as well, if you want to support further, or any other subjects that need support.
Thank you. Do you do observations like early years to demonstrate hitting objectives?
We don't have anything like Seesaw. We don't have anything like that. I will talk about how we document independent work, how we keep and assess that in a second. But no, there is nothing there apart from the independent journals, the maths books, and the curriculum journals to record learning. Our observations are essential, don't get me wrong. What we'll do there is we'll talk to each other. We use that assessment when it comes to teacher assessment, but there's no expectations from senior leadership teams at all to document, Jimmy played on the swing today. He showed me that he could use his number bonds whilst doing this. There is no expectation around that, simply because I don't think that's beneficial. That might just be me.
Okay. How many children in a focus group, James?
How many children in a focus group can differ. However, I would say max I tend to keep with me is about 6. But I have, and it has been known, and this is, I think, a beautiful thing about it, is that I have run focus groups with just 1 child before, because I actually felt the need of that child was way where they were on their particular understanding of a subject in maths. I pulled them off and we did 1-to-1 support. I think that's for you as a teacher to decide. Personally, I tend, rough average, there will be about 5 children on average.
And are they mixed ability or ability groupings?
So again, this can differ. I love mixed ability groups. I feel passionate about it. I don't think we should cap children's understanding. That's not, there has been times, that's not to say there hasn't, there has been times when I have done it by ability, because I think actually I need, this group of children will be able to access this, so I need to ensure that happens. There's a healthy balance to be struck. If you're constantly putting children in groups, there's plenty of research on here, I don't want to bang on about this, but if you're constantly putting children in groups based on what you think their ability is, then no, there's going to be a ceiling, and I don't like doing that.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So this is some pictures of our environment. A couple of things I want to point your attention to. To the left-hand side of the page, this is our outside area. We were lucky enough to have it created for us last academic year. As you can see, as I spoke about last week, I'm a big believer in deconstructed play. And that's what I mean by deconstructed play. There's no Great Fire of London, wigs, diaries, bakers, buildings. There's nothing like that. It's simply deconstructed. And the beautiful thing about that is that from that deconstructed, those deconstructed items, imaginative play comes from it. And we see such wonderful things. And I'm going to show you some pictures later of children doing stuff with that outside. But yes, I'm a big believer that the imagination is such a powerful tool, and that from deconstructed play, the beautiful thing about it is that ownership by the children becomes much greater. If you're simply told this is this, that is it, they will treat it, and imagination is capped. With this, it's limitless and it's beautiful to see. We've seen the Thames come from this when we did Great 5 London. I've seen laboratories be built to dissect plants. I've seen wonderful things come from it. Below, we're again very, very lucky. I'm not going to deny that or kind of brush it aside. We're lucky enough we have an allotment in our continuous provision area. We grow plants. You can see there that there's a range of plants. This was taken this morning because I was in school this morning. But we're very, very lucky with our outside area. I understand that some people won't be as lucky. And I'll go back to what I said last week. I don't think that it's essential that you have an outside area, and that effective continuous provision cannot take place if you don't have an outside area. But it's also a fantastic tool if you are lucky enough to have it. The other things I want to point your attention to is on the far right-hand side of the screen, you can see what I'm talking about when I say my maths manipulatives. This is the kind of general format that we provide our areas and set up our areas to be. The picture to the left of that is what we call its shadow. And the reason for that is because we want to ensure that children put things back effectively. We want to ensure that tidying up is done efficiently so it doesn't take away from play and learning time. So every item in the classroom has its own shadow. And that when I start playing music, and that can range, great story is that I had children going home a couple of weeks ago, and in their bedrooms, they were going, and someone came into me and said, Mr. Johnson, are you playing the Venga Boys? Because the Venga Boys is a fantastic tidy up song. But yes, what we do is we have shadows. Everything goes back to on their shadows once they're done. As you can see in that example, there's nothing stopping you from using that as an opportunity to learn. So that container is 500 milliliters. And we've also shown that in different representations. It's a great way of keeping the classroom tidy. It's a great way of making children take responsibility for their tidying away their items. And the other thing that I've had lots of questions about is how we're ensuring curriculum coverage through the environment. The picture below isn't clear. I'll try and post this on my Twitter feed so you can see it in more detail. But what that is at the back of my cupboard and around my cupboard, I have the national curriculum for year 1 and 2 on display. And the reason for that is because I will highlight where my area is covering how my continuous provision is covering the national curriculum. So with that, for example, that is about measurement, and I've just highlighted, so it says children should be able to do this, this, and this. I've highlighted where my area is going to provide opportunities, where my classroom is going to provide opportunities for children to access that statement. And this is what I mean by, I don't have to teach every objective. I don't have to model every single objective, but what I can do is I can allow my environment to provide children with opportunities to rehearse and practice those statements. So we're going to go into documenting the journey, and this is where we're going to look at some examples of books. We're going to look at the key differences between my curriculum journals and my independent journals. And I'm not going to dwell on the maths book, because the maths book for me at this present time, and we are constantly looking at how we can develop this, is a reflection of what they've been doing in the focus groups, and anything else in terms of their maths goes into their independent journal. So you will see that the difference between the two as I go through them. So we have these two fantastic books. Ben's going to show you in a second, once we've done this slide, some examples of those books. But the key thing about the independent journal is that these journals are for the children and the children only. It's for them to document their continuous provision journey. We will give them the book when we think that they've been using their continuous provision time effectively. We're talking about metacognition here. We're talking about children taking responsibility and thinking about learning. And what we want to do is to ensure that actually during that process, children are documenting their journey to a high standard. And how we do that is that we model. And we model how that's done, and we give opportunities for children to see what that looks like. So we have a modeled independent journal at the front of the class, and that's my expectation is that it's of that standard. We see lots of different finished pieces that look different to the modelled book, but actually I can see that children have considered those standards. So the key principles of the independent journal is that actually they are completely owned by the children. Like I said, they're designed for the children to document their own learning. It's not something I'm going to pick up and mark at the end of the day. The reason for that is that I don't want to use it as something that I'm going to judge and tell children, actually, oh, well done, you've done this. However, next time I want you to do this. There's no however. That however, if I generally think it and I seriously want to give that children that piece of critical feedback, I will tell it when they're in the continuous provision in the space next time. I won't dampen their efforts in their books and say that's not quite, and we get out the dreaded pink or green pen. The resources are in the environment for the children to use to document that. I have, like I spoke about, giving children templates and writing frames is essential to how this becomes effective. I think I can show you this. So this is what I mean by this. I added these pictures to show you, is that actually this is how I document the journey. Every single station in my classroom has opportunities for writing. And these opportunities will go into their independent journal. My favorite station is this top left thing. And this is just an old bookcase that we had. And as you can see, I've labeled at the front each genre of writing. And I put a template and resources in each box for that particular genre of writing. And the reason that we can't expect children just to write diaries or write non-chronological. Instead, what we want to do is we want to ensure that actually we provide templates, models, and they're put into the area for them to use. So that top left hand has 6 different things. We do rotate it every so often, but these tend to be the 6 pillars of what I tend to use for my writing opportunities. But the right hand picture is an example of the cooking corner, and I'll show you a better picture of the whole cooking corner later. But again, there's a recipe template in there, and what that's used for is to ensure that children are writing about their cooking. They're making something, they're writing about it. And as you can see above it, I've used the space, I've written on black card, stuck it on the wall, and I'm going to be thinking about great words for instructions. When that was made, it was just in the moment kind of, I've noticed that children are not using first, second, third, or then, after, finally. This is a problem. That's my assessment. What am I going to do about it? Well, actually, we're going to put something on the wall. We're going to talk to children. You know, we're going to do that great thing we do as teachers. Oh my goodness, look what we've done today. These fantastic words that we could be using, and that teacher language that we do. And at the bottom is the picture of that independent journal station. We don't touch this, but you can see there's trimmers in there for children to use. And they cut up everything they want to put in their book. There's gold pens, there's post-it notes for them to talk about what they've done so they can give me more information about what they've done on their journey. So that's the independent journal, and the curriculum journal is where I document what we've done in our focus groups. And that is where I keep my 4 focus group activities that I set for the week, the learning challenge stuff, and I put that in the curriculum journals. Ben's going to show you another example in a second when we go, we'll just briefly stop. But that curriculum journal is more aligned with your standard exercise book. It's my kind of my documentation as such of where the children are at in my focus groups. The beautiful thing about this is that I can look at what they're doing in their curriculum journal and look at what they're doing in their independent journal. I can compare the two, and I can see, you know, we did conjunctions last week, but actually, you know, Johnny from here is not doing conjunctions. So that tells me that he did that, he performed to me, he performed the acts that he could do it, but actually when it comes to doing it independently, he still can't do that. So I need to do a bit more work on conjunctions with Johnny. And that's how you can play off the 2 books against each other, which is fantastic to use as a form of assessment. We tend to make sure there's lots of opportunities for templates in there for the children to access. And the moderation evidence, so if you're a year 2 teacher thinking, James, that's great, but where's the moderation evidence? I will get both those books together and pull out the best evidence from both of those books. Beautiful thing about that is one of the moderation statements is that it has to be independent, and what better example than a completely independent journal. Ben.
Right, James, quite a few questions coming through here, so just bear with me for a second. So the first is, if we are the independent journals used in continuous provision time, and if there's an expectation that children are doing this, are we therefore not letting them play and therefore stopping them learning their skills that way? What are the expectations around that?
That's a really good question. I think personally we are letting them play, and there's no limit on that, but actually what we want children to do is stress the importance of documenting that. And by doing that, you're making children responsible for their learning. It happens in the continuous provision time. There's no stop, everybody stop, because Mr. Johnson needs evidence in his books. Can you please go over to the independent journal section, and can you write something so it looks like Mr. Johnson is doing his job properly? There's none of that. It really, really is a case of actually when the children feel it's the right time to document it, they document it. I have two boxes in my classroom that are curriculum journal box and a independent journal box. And that's where they can put anything that has been created by them in the lesson, in the time, and they can come back to it at a later date. I'd much rather children invest time into their learning and take longer periods of time and put it when they feel it's right. So no, it doesn't take away from the play. What it does do is it encourages children to reflect on their learning.
Thank you. Without observations, how do you assess and track learning and progress?
Well, at our school, we use an assessment system where we will do 3 summative assessments throughout the course of the year. That enables us to see where children are at in terms of an expected standard, like a standardized score as such. In terms of, I think assessment and observation are powerful. I think observations are powerful, but doesn't mean I have to write it down. It doesn't mean that I have to make a record of absolutely everything. If there's something essential, then obviously I'm going to be thinking, okay, what can I do with this piece of information? But we tend to use standardized assessment and assessment from day-to-day learning in their curriculum books and independent journals.
Thank you. Whilst some children are in the focus groups, are the others accessing continuous provision independently?
Yes. Another question, is it loud? No, it's not. You'll find if children are engaged, if your environment is supporting them effectively, no, it's not loud. Children, and that's around expectation of how they're using the environment as well. But yes, they do. And they use it independently a lot. And they will keep focused a lot.
Thank you. In the focus group, is it just teacher input or do they do an activity in their curriculum journal?
So this can range. A focus group doesn't have a set straight way of doing things. Sometimes I'll model and sometimes I'll spend a significant amount of that 20 minutes modeling and then set them off to do something in that focus group. But most of the time, it's a dialogue. Children learn best when you speak to them and you have an active dialogue with them. And that gets us, you can make, when you're on the carpet and you can never guarantee who's learning because you can't talk to every single one of them. In a focus group you can, and you can ask them and say, oh, Peter, what do you think of this? Or Hannah, how do you think this? What do you think about this? Or Hannah, can you show me an example of that? And you can have those opportunities.
What if a child doesn't want to do anything in their independent journal?
Then that's about having a more pastoral conversation with them. That's about you sitting down and stressing the importance of it. Why do we have independent journals and trying to bring them on? And that's why it's important to bring children on board with your vision. And you can't stress that enough. We often talk about stakeholders. Well, sorry for saying the obvious, but children are the biggest stakeholder in the whole process. You need to talk to them. They need to buy into your vision. If they buy into your vision, that's when effective continuous provision happens and you won't have that problem to start with.
Thank you. Last question on this one, James. Are the summative assessments a bit of a shock because all this time they've been playing and then suddenly they're expected to do a test?
Yes. No, I don't think they are. And actually what we tend to find is, and you might laugh and you might say, oh no, you're lying because you're on a podcast. Children quite enjoy showing off. And also when you set those summative assessments up properly, and at Key Stage 1, there's no expectation that summative assessments take place in single lines, dead silent. They are, I make sure that testing conditions are up to the highest standard, but there is no shock. It's I stress to them is that it's an important opportunity to show off what you've learned so far.
Lovely, thank you.
Lovely.
Sorry, James. Someone's just asked what tests we use. So we use the NTS assessments. There's an assessment for reading and maths, and then we do comparative judgment for writing across the school. Do you want to see should we do some independent journals?
Yes, please show off, yeah.
So we'll start with some independent journals. Hopefully the technology allows this. James, you can talk about it and narrate it as I turn the pages.
Okay, so this is an independent journal. This is a child's individual response. If you open any other one up, it will not look like this. As you can see, the yellow pieces of paper are those pieces of paper that I have around my environment. Sometimes it's just a little bit cut up. Sometimes it's a set template. As you can see there, Ben, if you stop on that sheet particularly, that page, on the left, they've documented something they've been doing in maths. We had a period of time where obviously we learned about sharing and dividing. So what this child wanted to do is ensure that actually they were modeling that they could do that. And again, that isn't me saying, go and show me you can do division. That is children taking it up independently, saying, actually, I'm going to demonstrate that I've understood what's happened here. Ben, is it possible that you could read out that green Post-it note at the top? Under pressure.
I've divided how many groups there are on each number. I put a dot in a circle until I get to the right number on the sum.
Okay, so from that piece of information, what that is, I make sure that children put a sticky note on most of their independent journals. And that's me asking them to tell me why they did it, what they know about it, and it's another opportunity for assessment. So again, showing maths and then straight away onto physical and human features. A healthy balance, we're stuck on division still. So human features, we were doing that in geography, so they covered that. And then this is division, again, science in there, talking about fruits. So they've made sketchings of fruits because that was something we spoke about that they could potentially be doing. And then the final thing before we broke up, they've described the fruits. So they've written a description of, I can't see that off the top of my head, melons. And again, it's a valuable tool for assessment because what they've done in that time shows me exactly what they can do and what they can actually do. Again, so this is a different child now. They've taken photos. We give children iPads to use. We tell them how they print, how they upload photos, and they are free to trim them, print them, stick them in their books. They title it, they tell me what's in here. So this child has made the River Thames and has looked at a bridge. As you can see at that bottom one, he said that a bridge is a human feature, whilst a River Thames is a physical feature. So again, children reimagining and using the environment. Again, the lion, once upon a time, so he's written a story. We did a lot of on story writing. If you were at the conference, if you were at this talk last week, you would understand that my class had a barrier when it came to story writing. So to get around that, I changed my continuous provision. I put in a small world area where children had opportunities and exposure to writing stories. And I think as a product of that, we got children writing stories more. Again, similar, these are two children that started these books at the same time. And as you can see, they're largely completely different. Again, they've been doing sketching of fruit on that right-hand side. Again, I can use it as a tool of assessment. I can pick those up and take them and have conversations at pupil progress meetings. There's no expectation that it's hard, solid evidence in terms of, I haven't marked it, but that doesn't mean I haven't looked at it.
James, so just to be really clear, this is independent work that the children have done in their continuous provision time and decided to put that in their independent journal. This is nothing to do with adult focused or teacher focused groups or anything like that. This is work that they've gone off and decided to do based on the areas that you've got around the classroom.
Yes, completely.
Do you want to look at curriculum journals now? Yeah,
so we'll show the difference. So that's my independent journal. I love them. I think they're great. I think they're a fantastic tool of assessment. I think they're a fantastic tool of knowing what children know. So this is our curriculum journal. This is like the document that I said is more aligned with your standard exercise book. As you can see, the knowledge organizer at the front, they are consistent with the rest of the school. On the left-hand side, it's my assessment coverage. I'm checking that actually I am teaching the national curriculum. And that's one of the problems and one of the doubts that we have with continuous provision in year 1 and 2. Are we teaching the curriculum? Yes, we are. And where I've highlighted, you can see that I believe from evidence in this book, from evidence in the independent journal, that children have covered that particular statement. And we're going to show you something called a pink sheet assessment that I use as an additional tool, and as we use school-wide as an additional tool to check children's understanding. So as you can see at the bottom of this sheet, we've done a science investigation, but a while later, Ben, can you just read out the activity, the pink sheet?
Yeah, so it's, what do we mean when we're talking about the suitability of material? Circle the word which best defines this. And then the challenge question is, John has decided he's going to make football boots out of paper. Explain why this is not a suitable material and what would be a better choice.
So every so often, what I do is I challenge children to answer one of my pink sheet assessments. And all I say to them is, oh, you know what? I think you did some fantastic learning a couple of weeks ago. And that's the key. A couple of weeks ago, we are checking that children's long-term memory has been altered. I'm sorry to quote Ofsted, but we're checking to see that the long-term memory of our children in our class has been altered. And by doing this, we looked at the suitability of materials in a focus group in the learning challenges a couple of weeks ago. In that pink sheet assessment, I am checking that that has stuck with the children. If it has not, if I answer one of those questions and I look at their responding to that on the spot and it is not right, I will instantly do an intervention as such to say, right, you've given me this answer and you said paper is an appropriate way to make a football boot. Do we really think that? Should we think about this together? Let's go and get something out and show that why that's not a good idea. It's a fantastic tool of assessment. There's a range of them. I'll show you more of those. I've got pictures in my slide of assessments. But yes, Ben, if you just flick through some of the writing opportunities here. This is the learning challenge sheet here, and you will see that every week there is different challenges. Now, at this point, when we did the Grade 5 London, we had 6. We retracted that to 4 learning challenges, and we took away maths from this learning challenge sheet. The reason for that is because actually we're great believers that maths can happen in multiple contexts, and it's almost like telling children that you can only do maths in this book. I didn't want to do that. So what we did is we model a lot of maths in the environment. And it's one of the key pillars of our effective continuous provision. And they will produce that in their maths books and in their independent journals, as you've seen. But we retracted it to 4 because we wanted to ensure quality and use the time effectively.
James, can I just stop you there? I'm going to switch the book because we've got some comments to say that these are obviously just higher ability pupils. So I've got a child that's performing probably just under where we would expect. So I'm just switching that in so people can have a look.
Yeah, more than happy.
Just while we're having a break, can I just ask some questions?
Yes.
So do the children stick their own work in?
Yes. Yeah.
Someone said, does it take a long time to stick it in? Well, it doesn't because the children do it. How do you teach 5-year-olds to print photos? Because you rehearse.
You can teach a child to do anything if you practice. That's, we at the start of the year, we spend an awful lot of time doing that. And we'll say, actually, this is what we want you to do. And we'll practice that and we'll teach children. And we live in a modern world. They can do that. I often, when you give children an old computer screen, they go to touch the screen and they try and swipe it across. That's because they're advancing with the ongoing advancing world.
So just to say, this is a pupil premium child, also SEN girl, just to give you a bit of context there. Do we teach joined handwriting in year 1?
Yes.
Do we use a handwriting scheme?
Yes, we do. Can't remember the name of it. That's why I've gone quiet. I'm sorry.
It's the handwriting file.
Yes.
Is there a particular reason why yellow paper is used in the independent journals?
Yellow paper?
Yes.
Have you seen yellow? Oh, yes, sorry. That for me is so that I've made it obvious there's writing opportunities. And it simply is that. I love making a big fuss of it. And children love multiple coloured paper. That's the only simple answer. You provide it and say, look, here's some fantastic paper for you to see your writing on. Children love that. And they love the little things in life. So, yes.
How do you manage independent journal writing for year 1 children who are not independent writers? I'll answer that, shall I? So we have a similar approach in reception. So the children will do their own journals and they will also set them up in this way. So they're used to that expectation. You might not get the full amount of writing that we're seeing in some of these texts, but actually whatever they're writing in terms of mark making or anything like that may go in if they decide for it to go in. Someone's spoken about whether, because we've had such success in Key Stage 1 with continuous provision, whether we're going to do that in Key Stage 2. And I think I'm just looking at the time, we'll answer that at the end. Do the children get opportunities to make changes to their work?
Yes, all the time. If they're not happy, I encourage them. That is fantastic. That's completing that loop of feedback, isn't it? And that's the essential part of it.
Yeah. This is a really interesting question. How has the workload changed for you in terms of planning and resourcing since switching to provision-based learning?
So people always ask me this, and they always come in and say, this must take forever to set up. And actually, you invest the time at the start, and it's a lot of investment at the start. But once it's up and running, and like I've said before, the provision doesn't change that often in terms of the actual standard things that are there, resources. It doesn't change. It's 4 activities a week in terms of the learning challenges. And I've just flagged up, I don't know why I'm getting questions, but I flagged up with questions and said, how often do you get learning challenges and set learning challenges? We set those weekly, the different set of learning challenges every week. But yes, Sorry, I've lost my mind there, Ben. What was
That's fine, you can stop there.
Yeah.
Do you record all subjects in one curriculum journal?
Yes, apart from maths, RE's in a separate book because we're a Church of England school, and that's it, really. It all goes in there.
Thank you. What if a child keeps doing the same activity in their independent journal?
Good point. And that's why it's important we read them. Although they're theirs completely, we do read them and track them, and would have that conversation and say, I love it, and I love your passion for doing this, but actually, why don't we try this today? And, you know, you might want to choose to do this. Again, it's about expectation from the adults on the child and saying, what are you going to do with your time? And having that conversation.
Thank you. Someone's asked for an early years session. We have had a chat with our reception teacher about doing something similar, and we will send information out. Lots of questions about EAL. We have very, very small percentage of EAL in our school. It's about 5%, but all who are very, very good English speakers. So I would be hesitant to answer any questions that might help you around that, but we can certainly signpost you to some other practitioners that have got some more experience with EAL for you to have a look at that. The books that you're looking at are a mix of year ones and year twos. Someone's asked about budget for resources. So my belief as a head teacher is that in order to get this right, you've got to spend money on it. That means that we've got to resource the environment well, and we have to make sure that if we want the independent journals to look really good, we need to give the children the right resources to do that. So things like the Post-it notes, the hole punchers, the strimmers, and all of that. So there is a bit of money spent on it, but I think last financial year, so 2019 to 2020, we spent about £500 in total. So you might have a PTA that can support you with that. Things like the cooking corner, we had resources donated by parents in terms of food and things like that. So not a huge amount of money. I'm conscious that we're whizzing through, but there's 32 questions that we haven't answered here. James, how do you address misconceptions in the work?
In the independent, both of them, the focus group's easy because you've got them there with you, so you do it in a standard kind of, oh, I've spotted you've done this, and written feedback when necessary. We, as a school, we've kind of got a policy where we've avoided and moved away from written feedback. But if I'm just going to jog my memory, I might make a note and pick up on it the next focus group. Again, effective use of adults in the environment. If you've read it, I make a note on a Post-it note, so the next day I'm going to come back to it and say, right, I read your independent journal and I was so proud of this. You know what we're going to talk about today? We're going to talk about this and how we go forward with this.
Okay, thanks, James. We'll some last question. Someone's asked about RE discreetly. Yes, we do. We that's one of that's taught when James is on PPA, but it's taught in focus groups again. So the teacher that takes that will teach small groups for RE, whilst others are enjoying continuous provision. James, lots of questions around photos. Do you want to share some more photos of your environment? Have you got more photos of the room?
So let's go back. We'll come back to that in a second. So there's just to point you in some of the directions. We use those pink sheets assessments in both maths and in curriculum journals. On the left, we saw we're doing plants, so we did assessments around plants. A couple of weeks after, we've taught that discreetly. So about 2 weeks before that labelling activity, we would have done an input on the parts of a plant. The bottom, we did again the different types and common plants we have. At the right, we do a weekly activity as part of the focus group at the end. I'll set them off and say, right, here is your pink sheet assessment. Can you show to me what you've done this week, what you've done last term, what you did last week, and what you did last year? Just 4 quick activities that they can answer and do correctly. Another example of some of the pictures of the environment and what's in around. As you can see, children, the activity there with the lonely beast, I've just set up a massive sheet of paper and said this week we're going to be looking at roll on the wall. And this is just some children's response after I came over and said, oh, what are you doing? And they said, Mr. Johnson, you know you did roll on the wall at the start of the week. Well, this is what we're doing now. I will put signs up to jog children's memories. You can see I've written a couple of signs there to say, can you create a roll on the wall, or can you do this? Again, I'm trying to encourage them, but I'm not forcing them down there. We do track the children, and someone asked me a question a couple of days ago about how do you track the children are completing it. On a Wednesday, we tend to put up a sheet that says this is related to the learning challenges. And the learning, I know I'm conscious of time too, but they have 4 challenges. I know this is 6, but they have 4 challenges throughout the whole week. These are related to These are expectation is that have these done by the end of the week. They are all linked to national curriculum objectives. And the coverage for us is for a 2-year cycle of doing the year 1 and 2 objectives over the course of 2 years. Differentiation, we use progression maps. So we look at the fact that what should a year 1 be doing? What should a year 2 be doing? And we'll have those conversations with the children in the environment. What this does is it keeps the whole class together, because what you can get a habit to, particularly with mixed form entry classes, is teaching it disjointly, so there's feels like there's 2 different classes in there, and actually we want to keep them all together as possible so they enjoy that learning journey. I'm going to use as quickly as possible an opportunity to look at this as well. So this is my planning for the term. We did Grade 5 London. I scaled it down so it's more appropriate, so it's 4 pictures, 4 activities. What that is the different curriculum subjects and domains, and what week we're going to be doing certain activities in. I fuel the generating thoughts because I think that's really, really important through the use of power of reading. And I use that to create things like drama activities, or we'll do research-based activities. And that's one of their learning challenges for the week. That helps them with their writing for that opportunity. That writing opportunity will come in my focus group. It's a focus to make sure that it happens. And some people often say to me, well, does that mean their children's writing when they're in a focus group is not independent? And no, it is independent, but there is necessary support when needed, teaching and, support when needed, and leave to do it independently when they can, and shadow groups form as a consequence of that. As you can see, we ensure that we have a wide range of subjects in there. Again, the progression of this comes from the progression document. So at the start, for example, if we take art, I'm looking at the staying within the lines to start with when we look to pastels, and slowly over time, we develop further and further and further. Now in week 4, if I look back at their journal, in week 5, if we're going on to blending, and I look back at their journal and I see that actually staying within the line was a problem, I'm going to use my adult, I'm going to use myself, and we're going to go back over that in a continuous provision time. We're going to pull them off, and that's where an intervention focus group can happen. And we'll say, right, look, you did this, let's practice this more and have better opportunities to practice. Again, the reason we get a lot of questions about accessing the curriculum, and it's just about planning where you're going to address that curriculum and using the area, the support, the provision to enable children to access that. High quality modelling at the start of the week and effective environment to support that. Ben, do you want to stop?
Yes, let's stop there. So James, really good question here, and something that we came across at the start was, how do you get around reading as a barrier to the challenge sheets? Thinking about year 1 who may struggle to read.
Yep, so good point. And that sheet is very wordy. The reason how we got around that is that at the start of the week, I will record my voice on the smartboard, and I will put it up, and it's always up throughout the whole continuous provision time, that particular challenge sheet, the learning challenge sheet. If children want to know what they should be doing, or they can't read the challenge sheet in their book, they can go up to the smartboard, click it, and it will be my pre-recorded voice saying, describe what the Grade 5 London might have looked like, or something like along those lines. It also, what it does is provides a challenge for them, and enables them to think, I'll say, challenge, can you do this? Again, I think that answers that question.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you. Do the challenges change with the children's interest, or do you stick to them for coverage and exposure?
Interest plays a fantastic role. I will get that planning sheet out at the start of every PPA session, and I will think, right, children have shown a real interest in this. How can I shape this journey? The objectives stay the same. We don't alter the national curriculum. The objectives stay the same. It's just how I'm going to get them to access that might change.
Thank you. How do you ensure that every child has completed each task?
So
go on, Jake.
On a Wednesday, we put up a sheet, and we have all of their names. They can come over to us and ask to see that, or we will pull children over and say, oh, do you want to look at this? And it will be the 4 activities, a simple tick sheet, if they've done it or not. At the end of each day, I look through their curriculum journals. I say, I'll look at it, I'll do my marking as you would normally do. I'll look back and I'll think, okay, right, they've done it to a fantastic standard, or they've done it to the best of their ability, and therefore they've completed it. I'll give it a tick. On Wednesday, we start to have conversations, and this is where time management skills become important, where I will say to the 5-year-olds, okay, right, you need to be thinking about this. And I'm going to be looking and seeing if you're thinking about this. And that's when, over the course of time, initially, you do get children that want to leave it till last minute. But by doing it every week and sticking to your structures and putting those structures in place early on and sticking to them, that's when they will start getting the challenges done throughout the week.
James, I think it's fair to say that, as all schools will, we have very high expectations of the children in terms of owning their learning, in terms of that metacognition, in terms of them taking complete ownership of their learning. So those conversations on a Wednesday where we're saying to children, right, come on, you've only done 2 out of the 5 tasks. How are you now going to manage your time to make sure that that gets done? Works whether they're in year 1 or year 2.
Yep.
There's some questions around how do we hear children reading throughout the week?
So reading is, as you saw from my timetable, we do phonics sessions in the morning and we do guided reading sessions in the afternoon. That doesn't mean that there's opportunities throughout the day to hear them read. In the afternoon, we follow read, write, ink comprehension with year 2 and read, write, ink phonics with year 1. That is taught every day without fail. It's ring fence time. The reading is how children access the curriculum, and so we've ring fenced that time. It's taught in small groups in a similar fashion to continuous provision, but there is a big emphasis put on it.
Okay, are your phonics and guided reading sessions whole class or focus groups?
Focus groups.
How do you fit everything into a 15-minute phonics lesson?
Well, in terms of year 1, in the morning, year 1 have a 45-minute phonics session as from the timetable. And although 15 minutes of that is where we teach the handwriting, half an hour phonics session a day.
Thank you. How do we encourage reading for pleasure?
Oh, really, really good question. Someone's got an inspection coming soon. What we do is we ensure that actually conversations about reading happen. It's a school-wide approach. Destination reader we use in Key Stage 2 to ensure that happens. But in Key Stage 1, we take the similar approach where reading is about talking about reading. I'm really passionate about this. Reading should not be writing. They are 2 completely different things. Make sure reading lessons are about discussing reading, discussing language, and put the focus on that. Don't be getting children to answer reams and reams of, can you find this word? Can you find? Do a couple of those a day, but make sure the emphasis is on reading.
Okay, James, I'm just going to answer a couple of questions here that are coming in, just some clarification for that phonics session. So the way that our mornings work at St Paul's, 9 to 9:45, reception in year 1 will have read, write, ink, and that will be delivered in small groups by teaching assistants. Year 2 will have a spelling, punctuation and grammar group with James. Years 3 to 6 will be in mixed ability, mixed age groups, mixed from years 3 to year 6 during that time, 9 to 9:45. And then in the afternoon, 2:30 to 3 o'clock, year 1 will have a read, write, ink, another session which focuses on the read, write, ink writing element. Year 2 to year 6 do guided reading, and in our school that is called Destination Reader, which is a way of teaching reading that we've implemented in over the last year. So that's sort of how the structure works. TAs have their own groups for phonics and for read, write, ink, and it works like that. Yes, phonics groups are streamed in reception and year 1, so we do the assessments and they're mixed into groups in that way. So what do Funky Fingers look like each morning?
So Funky Fingers, 15 minutes while they're coming in, start of the day, using that time effectively. Gross motor skills activities, fine motor skills activities, cutting things up, bead work, lots of things with tweezers, lots of balancing activities, whole host of things that you can get off the internet in terms of games, colouring, fine colouring, just all things developing fine and gross motor skills.
Thank you. What are the consequences for children if they don't do the challenges?
I think it's a consequence is a harsh word, but what we do is in the over the course of the week, we just make sure we monitor it. If they don't get it done by Friday, we just have a conversation with them and say, actually, look, we need you to be thinking about your learning. Get children to take responsibility, and you don't have to have that consequence because they do it. And you know, we have some children that will leave it a bit later, but you know, they get it done. If they don't get it done, this really doesn't happen, but at the start of the year, we just ensured that actually the parents were part of that conversation as well, and saying actually you need to, you inform the parents and tell them, keep them part of that conversation.
James, is it worth just talking about our Over to You there and how that links in with what we do further up the school for metacognition?
Yeah, so one of the big reasons we moved towards continuous provision is that in Key Stage 2, we do something called Over to You, which is a week where children come off curriculum and they focus on 3 activities that are set by the teacher, 3 questions that could be exploring something they've been learning about in their topic. they can then respond to that in whatever way they like. So we've had presentations, we've had films, we've had art, we've had stories. We ensure that there's an activity that lends itself to writing. But throughout that whole week, they do maths in the morning, and then straight away, this is Key Stage 2, they respond in their own way to those activities. So yeah, and as you can see, continuous provision lends itself to developing those skills.
Lovely, thank you, James. So I'm conscious of the time, and that some people are going to need to dash off and move on and things like that. So someone's asked about buy-in from parents. There's a podcast that we did last week that's available on YouTube and via our Twitter links. If you have a look at that, that's 15 minutes just talking about buy-in from senior leadership teams, buy-in from parents, buy-in from children, and anything like that. James, I think we're just, anything that comes in now in the last couple of minutes, we're just answering if people
Yes,
want
of course,
to
go for it. Yeah.
So how is the transition from continuous provision to year 3? So that's something that we're going to pick up on. So this coming year in September, we plan to introduce continuous provision into year 3 and year 4. And that's something that we'll be looking at so that we can continue to develop those skills as the children move into Key Stage 2. How do we train our support staff in this way of working, James?
Take them on the adventure with you. Take them to training opportunities with you, inform them about why you're doing things, share that reading with them, send them to our podcast, self-advertisement there, and also just be really, really eager about it. Yes, enthusiasm is infectious. Speak about it with joy, and teaching assistants do tend to come on. I know there'll always be these people in the staff room that are reluctant to change. It happens. But the best way to do things in education is to reflect, discuss why, and like we did at the whole start of our first talk, start with the why. Why are we doing this? And then the what and the how become the easy part.
Okay. Someone's asked about collective worship. We do that every afternoon, 3 till 10 past 3. So a short space of time that we do that. Someone's asked, do we have separate challenges for year 1 and year 2 children, James?
No, differentiation through looking at progression maps, looking at opportunities to stretch and challenge within the continuous provision using the additional adult or myself to do so.
Which book does any written phonics, reading or SPAG work go into?
So we have separate stuff, a separate book in terms, I say a separate book, I tend to keep everything that's phonics or everything that's grammar in flesh. That sounds odd. On whiteboards, quick fire activities that actually is going to sink in that way. And then you'll see if it's sunk in because it'd be in the independent journals. It'd be when they naturally do it in the curriculum journals. So actually I keep everything like that. I'm a big believer in the power of talk, and that's what we do.
So people have asked for Twitter handles. So I've just put those in the chat for everybody to share and have a look at. So there's the links for the podcast and any further sessions that we might do. Lots of people asking about last week's session. I'm really sorry we weren't able to record last week's. In all honesty, you haven't missed a huge amount. This one is probably more helpful in terms of practical advice and things that you can do. We plan to do a podcast a week until schools reopen, so possibly 3 weeks, and then maybe after that, if we can continue that. And each week we'll be looking at something different to do with continuous provision in Key Stage 1. So as I say, last week was about buy-in. This week's will be something different, and it'll be a different 10-minute chat as we go through.
I think this week's to do recording, Ben, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. We're going to do it on recording. We will send out the slides for this week's and last week's session if you want to do that. There's also a continuous provision blueprint that you can buy. It's £3. Just email me and I will give you the information on that. There is something else that's just come through. Do we think this use of schemes limit continuous provision opportunities? We use set schemes for maths. Sorry, this question came in earlier. Set schemes for maths, writing and phonics that doesn't accommodate continuous provision.
You've got to use your teacher judgment there in terms of I bring the white rose. I know this sounds really egotistical. I'm not egotistical, I promise. But we bring the white rose scheme to life through thinking about the white rose scheme is brilliant, for example, for creating activities that you can just set up. So we bring that to life through looking at it and thinking, how is this going to be relevant to our children? And how are we going to make this accessible in our provision? There's also become, we model everything so that we can bring it to life. Phonics, I do believe in systematic ways of teaching phonics. So we just follow that scheme rigorously. Power of reading, we use that as a scheme, but actually that's brilliant for generating ideas for continuous provision activities as well.
Lovely, James. I think there's still questions coming through. We will send the slides out. Don't worry about that for this week and last week. I think I've put my wrong Twitter handle on there. So it's Mr. It just logs in automatically. Mr. _ BMH1. Go through James's. He tends to use it more than I do. We've whistle stopped through in an hour and 5 minutes, and I'm conscious that there's so much more that people want to ask. When coronavirus is over, or we're back to some sort of normality and school visits are allowed, we would love people to come and visit.
Please
if
do.
you want to buy. We will try and do some more things like this, some more webinars, just to give you more information. We're conscious that there were over 600 people on the waiting list that haven't managed to get through. I'm going to end in the same way that I did last week. This takes an absolute leap of faith from head teachers, from your practitioners, from parents, from children, and all of that. But we will never go back to teaching Key Stage 1 in a formal way like we did before. This is absolutely the way forward. The children are passionate, happy, enthusiastic, engaged, loving learning. And that is absolutely because of continuous provision and the opportunities that this has given them. So if there are any head teachers that are concerned about what this is going to look like and what we're going to do for SATs and how it's going to affect all of that, just start with the children. That's absolutely what we're here for. Start with the children. They love it. They learn from it. And it has been the best thing that we have done. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening in. We really hope it was helpful. And we hope to catch up with you soon. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye.